Hi, everyone. Welcome to Malevolent Autopsy. This is a show hosted by patrons featuring patron content recorded live in the Invictus Discord as Malevolent is in its 5th season. This show is chock full of spoilers since every episode is meant to comment on a recent update. So if you want to avoid spoilers for all of Malevolent as it's been released to chapter 241 or part 49, check out now and come back next time. Our episodes are archived in the Discord before they're released to the public, so you can always listen later. I'm Queen, my pronouns are she, her, and tonight I control Arthur's mustache.
Hell yeah. I am PinchofPeppers, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm controlling his entire brain. So, he's gonna live for about 5 minutes.
Okay, do you want to remind us of what happened during this chapter, Peppers?
Episode 241. Tensions are high. Langward is dead, and anyone in Castle Carringford could have killed him. Accusations are thrown. As they hypothesize why Langward may have died, Arthur accuses him of being a cultist, something all three men notice before he corrects himself and calls him a, quote, believer of the Order of the Fallen Star, end quote. Friar shares that he believes in Galoon, the great corrupter of flesh. Barnabas, shockingly, we actually don't hear what he follows. But when they do ask Arthur who he follows, he says Horig, the unclean. Gerard is also a part of the Order of the Fallen Star, and it is revealed that they worship Azathoth. It is revealed that the Black Stone is descended from Azathoth. Barnabas speculates that Langward's death was meant to draw out an impostor among them. He is suspicious of Arthur's identity of the prince, though Arthur challenges him on his actions of being aggressive and paranoid, and that they aren't the, quote, truest of themselves right now, end quote. They all relent, and Barnabas agrees to go with Gerard to the library to learn more about the differing opinions of their gods, whilst the friar wishes to interrogate the witch. We must choose which to follow.
Well, thank you so much for writing that for us and for doing such a good job covering it. I know there's a lot of information that keeps getting passed around in these chapters, and they're kind of hard to make short. This episode was 12 minutes long, I think, a few seconds over that, and it still contained a lot of back and forth. The vote this week, we'll talk about it a little bit more in depth in a minute, but the vote this week was pretty back and forth as well. That this is basically a choice on who to accompany and where we're going to go and everything. Both options were pretty nerve-wracking. But as far as something in the chapter that I wanted to point out, I think it was really cool that Barnabas said the murder probably wasn't targeted. It was done to draw someone out, because that's actually not something I had considered. He's very much the action first, talk later type of person, but it's really suspicious to me that he's very dismissive. He doesn't really see what point the role of gods and religion and worshiping plays in this, or he tries to kind of brush it off really quickly. I think it's weird because he's an astronomer and he's very experienced with alchemy, and he was described as having specific visions. And you would think that someone who's having all of that to do with the stars and being kind of advanced in science, I suppose. I think that Barnabas probably has some kind of religion or god that he worships, but what I'm saying is I think it was particularly strange that he was like, what does that have anything to do with it? When Horbrook came out and was like, I have a god, and it sounds as creepy as you think it does, and all that nonsense.
Mm-hmm. Are we any closer to suspecting who killed Langward? Because I kind of think it's Everard right now.
You think?
Mm-hmm. Just what Barnabas said. First of all, so I don't think my precious Pookie Barnabas did anything wrong. And I don't think he killed Langward.
You have Blorbo glasses on.
I do think what Barnabas said about drawing something out was very interesting. And of all the people to, like, benefit from that the most would be Everard. So I do think it's Everard. I think he's just, like, you know, sipping his little wine and, like, kicking his feet back and sipping it while he was like, by the way, just letting you all know, I wasn't around Barnabas when Langmore died. Bye! Like, he's such a diva, first of all. Second of all, I think he's orchestrating this.
I mean, that would make sense. I can see that. I was suspicious of Everard in the very beginning, too. Although, I don't know, like, it doesn't make sense to me for him to draw everybody here and then start killing them one by one.
I think a couple reasons why is, number one, he's like, I don't fucking care. It's like, okay, well, if you drew everyone out to see this black stone, and you don't care if some of the people you invited were killed, a part of me thinks it's like, oh, you're going to use them as like a little blood sacrifice or something. And the additional use of the blood, doesn't it like make people into grinners?
Well, we've seen that in the Call of Cthulhu games, there is lore that suggests if you apply blood to the obelisk, which I think was mentioned as either part of the Blackstone or the Blackstone itself, or, something similar to it. But obelisk is kind of adjacent to Blackstone. It's made of the same material. Thank you, Graham and Fish. It's made of the same material, and when you apply blood to it, grinners happen. So, yeah, we get that blood is probably needed for this if that's relevant to it. The thing is that, like, if any blood is gonna work, it doesn't have to be special talented people blood. So why these specific folks being brought here?
I mean, it's gotta be because it could be a potential of them being like a risk to him. They can be competition to him. They're also part of these different cults, and maybe they're competing for the Blackstone.
That's fair.
Autumn says that he draws the most promising minds to sacrifice them at the altar with only one survivor. I definitely vibe with you, Autumn, when you say that, because I'm like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. I mean, these are men of science, quote unquote. They are higher thinking than most of the plebeians. And I think there's also this is also going to be like a test of wit and strength.
Yeah.
And Langward already failed. Well, Langward's already a fucking idiot, I guess. He lost the IQ test. And this is just a huge, elaborate IQ test. And kind of like the Hunger Games, see like who survives, and they're the biggest, baddest bitches, like, of them all.
I could see that. I could see that it has to do with something. I think I've said this a few episodes ago, but maybe something that, like, they have to prove themselves worthy of some specific thing. Maybe they're going to have to hold an avatar of a god or something in their brain or something like that. Like, I could totally see that it's going to come down to one person that has a specific trait or proves themselves in a specific way. However, I will say that I was reading back on the way that Everard introduced everybody, and he actually straight up says that 2 of the 4 people here have visions. Straight up, the word visions is used in their intro. It's not used with Warren, and it's not used with, I think, Horbrook, but it is used for Barnabas, and it's used for Gerard. He specifically is talking about the fact that they have, like, grander visions, and I think you could say it's metaphorical. You could say that it's literal. I think it's interesting that this is the word that he uses to describe this when Arthur can't see. And the fact that we're given these people who are apparently seeing these cracks and they have a specific talent or skill. You exemplify charisma. This is him talking about Warren. And yet endeavor to find more beyond what you already possess. Your hunger drives you. And he's talking about how all of these people that he's brought here together, like, they all want something more than their position has. They're pushing too hard. They're kind of becoming socially unacceptable or doing things that people are afraid of because they want to know more. And it's very interesting because we've also been told in Malevolent, knowledge is kind of a dangerous thing. It's a good thing to have, but it's also something that will come at a cost. I think we saw that, when Arthur started having his death visions. That was a result of him poking around a book.
Yeah. Autumn makes another good point where they say that it's kind of an arena, and I very much agree with that sentiment.
Yeah, I think an arena is a good way to put it. Especially the feeling of Aaliyah being there.
Yeah. And another thing is, Fish asks to what end? Well, I do think that the Grinners will have a part to play in this because the recipe is already there. and the ingredients are already there. So we have the Blackstone, and we're getting all this blood. I haven't done much research, meaning any research on how grinners are created. But I think, excess blood is a part of it.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to see what the role of the witch is also in this. Because it just feels like an elaborate murder mystery Everard is doing to not only entertain himself, but also, like, almost feed the Blackstone. And I do think Aelia has a part in it.
I agree. I think she's needed for some specific thing. I think it's interesting, again, that her eyes are covered. I really hope we get an answer about that. Hydra says, I wonder if the way they're all pushing the envelope and doing things that aren't socially acceptable is meant to be a grinner parallel with how they're entirely uninhibited. Yeah, that's another thing I was going to bring up earlier was grinners, their whole thing is the lack of inhibition is really what makes them so violent and so dangerous, is because you kind of peel back all of the layers of morality and pressure to be a good person, really, and like your conscience, and that kind of pushes them to a base desire to do harm. And so it's interesting if you think about the way that kind of pressure can be used in the situation where everyone's trapped together in a castle and they're all being pushed and pushed to strip away what they know of the outside world and what they're doing to kind of find out who the killer is and survive the night and all this stuff. I think it's kind of parallel to what grinners are at the core of it. Some people are speculating in the chat. Salt that melts snow says maybe she has a voice in her head and being guided by it. That would be really fun if we had another John Arthur moment, but it was Aaliyah and maybe another fragment of a god. Salt that melts snow also says, obviously, what if the witch is like Arthur? And then Bird says, why are her eyes covered? Lady Justice coded. That's why. And I like that a lot. The idea of her being blind in terms of having no bias, I guess, being very positioned toward truth and the ability to carry out justice, maybe. I don't know.
I think this is a good time to pivot into voting.
I agree.
Because I want to meet her. And so that's why I picked it. And even though Liz added me, or I don't know if she added me or she mentioned me or something, somebody added me and was like, you're going to pick the library because that's where your Pookie is. And listen, I love Barnabas. I do love him. But I don't want to read a fucking book. I want to meet this witch lady. So I think we should meet the witch lady.
This chapter's vote, chapter 241's poll, is written as join the friar or join Gerard and Barnabas. Now, this right now, it's a Sunday night, 328 votes total. This is the first time I think autopsy has been recorded after a vote is already finalized, because we do know that the vote closed this morning. So there's no flipping. We definitely voted to join the friar, and that is what won, 60% to 40%. I will say that the first couple days of this poll, or maybe the first day, it was pretty back and forth. We had a brief tie for a little bit where people were really having trouble picking. There were lots of really great and interesting arguments, things that still make me uncertain if we chose the right thing. We even had Harlan come in and get a little bit involved in the special closed off Harlan and Joe poll chat, which, for those who don't know, is just a special channel where Harlan and Joe can say things about the poll, ask us questions, or make jokes, just to kind of stir the pot or get us to think about other sides and things like that. Even I would say for Harlan to understand what we're thinking, because this is a game that we're playing and he is the GM, and so talking to us is beneficial for him too. But it is closed off in the fact things that are said there have to stay there, because sometimes even Harlan and Joe's really harmless jokes can totally throw off a poll and get people voting a different way, which sometimes is just not their intentions. Some people prefer a quote unquote Harlan-less vote experience, and that's why we have a separate channel for it. So it was really cool. He asked us some questions there, had some really good talks with Fish and with me and with a couple of other people in the chat. So that was fun. I kept flipping back and forth. A stiff breeze pushed my vote this week. Not super confident in either one, but I can see that you have strong feelings, Peppers.
Yeah, I do not peruse the poll chat, ever at all. So I'm coming at it from a very, like, blind point of view, where I'm kind of like, the way that I understand it is I think a lot of lore people will love to go into the library and we can read and learn more about these gods. And I think that would be very interesting. Absolutely. On the other hand, however, I think people who are incredibly interested about the witch are going to want to go with the friar. Now, this is not everybody who's picking the library only wants to learn about the lore, or everybody who's picking the witch, or the friar, I guess, just wants to see the witch. No, that's not what I'm saying. But I think there is a large majority of people who are like, this, I think there are absolutely arguments, because again, I think everybody comes at it from different angles. Absolutely, I see this as a game. I also see this, I think the majority, if not everybody here, also sees this as a story. And to me, I think both are very interesting. I would love to learn about, these gods and how they're further explored. Who knows? Maybe we might even learn about the King in Yellow more. But at the same time, Aelia has been constantly a point of mystery and this character that I really want to learn more about, and we haven't had a chance to talk to her. So I want to meet her. I want to talk to her. And this is also potential where Arthur can go up to the friar and be like, hey man, you're a fucking liar. Like, your shoes are still on. You're sweating like a motherfucker when you're running over to when Langward died. Like, what's up? You're such a bad liar. So I'd love to see that. I don't necessarily think that... I don't know how Arthur's going to treat this, but him being an investigator and him always choosing the option where it's like, you're going to get punched. I do think all cards are on the table. I don't know what he's going to do, but all I know is that I really want to see Aelia.
So there's lots of ways you could vote in this poll, and I think ultimately those 40% of us who voted for going with Gerard and Barnabas, let me just say this. At the very beginning, when we didn't even know how this poll was going to be worded, I thought it was going to be go to the library or go to see Aaliyah. And that, it turns out, was not how the vote was worded, and it was instead join the friar or join Gerard and Barnabas. That means there is a good chance that, in my head anyway, this is how I interpreted that. This is about who we're joining and not necessarily where they're going. So they may not get to their destination, which means if we joined Gerard and Barnabas, they may not even make it to the library, or they may be in the library and something happens to where it doesn't actually have anything to do with the library. Versus joining the friar, maybe they don't make it to the witch. Maybe something happens on the way there. So really, this just came down to who you would rather accompany, and I think that it was an interesting twist on what you could vote for. So I will say, as people point out, undoubtedly, it's, there's no promises that we're actually going to see Aaliyah. That's just kind of what the friar's intention is. So really, it's voting for accompanying the friar or not. And I understand both sides of it, and I've seen a lot of really great poll discussions and interactions about this.
I do agree that when we go with the friar, there's a killer on the loose, and we don't know who it is. Is it wise to go alone? To split off and go alone? At the very least, if Barnabas and Gerard are together and one of them dies, we know who did it.
Yeah. So
they're not going to be stupid about it unless they are, and we'll see. We'll see about that. But if Gerard mysteriously dies, well, we know who did it. I also think it's smarter to go with the friar, so the friar isn't alone, so that if the friar mysteriously dies, who did it? We still don't know. So having people, what's that classic, oh my gosh, Scooby-Doo. Thank you. Absolutely nobody. I answered my own question. Scooby-Doo. One of the classic no-nos is split up. Freddy, you fucking moron. You never split up. Anyway, you always go together.
But I would argue that the fact that Everard described Prince Warren with this whole, Oh, you exemplify charisma and yet endeavor to find more beyond what you already possess. Your hunger drives you, and we're not choosing to go to the library. Like that, I don't know, that seems weird. The fact that we were explicitly told Prince Warren wants to seek more and understand more, but instead we're going to not a library.
Well, alternatively, I could use the same argument if we're going to Alia and we want to learn more about her. That's still going out and hungering for further knowledge, which is through Alia, to get more information about, hey, what are you doing with the body? Hey, where were you? I think we could also make the same argument.
No, because I disagree, because when you're going to a library or you're going with people who are seeking answers at a library, that is a specific and very intentional symbol for going to seek knowledge. When you're going to talk to somebody, that's investigative, sure, but it's not a source of knowledge. Like, the witch isn't an encyclopedia. To me, it's a totally different thing. In fact, we've even been told that she's not talkative, that she has not talked.
Well, I want to hear the fucking girly talk.
But she may not.
I know, but in the same case, this is the problem. Hey, if we go to Barnabas and Friar, who knows if the library there will actually have any information about these additional gods. Maybe we won't learn anything. So I don't necessarily think saying, hey, even though we pick this poll option, we might not actually get what we picked. I think ultimately we can use that argument on any poll option from this point forward because we just don't know.
Well, the reason I pointed that out was because people were voting based on where they wanted to go, not who they wanted to go with. And I think that the poll is explicitly worded to draw our attention to the fact that we are going to be accompanying people, and it's not so much about where they end up. The story may end up going the same way either way. It's more about our decision on who we want to stick around with. And I do understand, like, I have points written down that are in favor of the library because, like I said, I'm very back and forth. It's nerve-wracking to go toward the library. Books have not proven to be very safe in this podcast, and answers and knowledge aren't always safe to have. So, like, maybe the library isn't the best idea, being surrounded by books when a lot of this started because of a shitty book. On top of the fact that Barnabas is the most vocally open to this violence and seems very disinterested in how religion could play a role in this, despite the fact that he's now going to the library to research more, which I think is weird. He even thinks the murder had nothing to do with Langward's allegiance to the order, but rather drawing somebody out as different. And of course, it's concerning to split the party to go with him. I think it would be weird to feel safe alone with Barnabas. Even if Gerard is there, we have no evidence to say that Gerard would protect us. He could hold us down for all we know, while Barnabas, takes the shot.
Before we get away from it, Fish also mentions that the friar said that the three, being, I think, Barnabas, Gerard, and Langward, attempted to speak to the witch, and she never, responded.
Everard was very quick to dismiss the witch as a suspect. I know that you three spoke to her, or attempted to at least, but I'm not convinced so easily that a woman as powerful as she can be ruled out entirely. I would like to go speak with her myself. Which is a straight up lie, because everyone knows that Arthur has not spoke to the witch. So, yeah, something is wrong. Yeah, I mean, that's weird as fuck. I don't think he was actually gonna go to see her, but now that we're accompanying him, he might have to. Either that, or he's going to have to let us in on his lie, or we're going to keep him from doing something. We'll see. I think that there's good reasons to go with pretty much anything. I could see the other side of, joining Gerard and Barnabas. On the flip side, being alone with the friar just wasn't as interesting to me. Potentially seeing Aaliyah is interesting. The witch is interesting to me, but in my opinion, that's not the thing I'm voting for. The thing I'm voting for is joining the friar or Gerard and Barnabas, and I'm not interested in joining the friar, so I felt like that shouldn't be what I voted for. As much as I think he's suspicious, that's also part of the reason that I kind of don't want to be alone with him. I don't know. Like I said, I went back and forth on this, and ultimately I think both options were good, but I mean, clearly we went with joining the friar, so we're going to end up seeing how that goes.
Yeah, and see, I come at it from a different point of view, because I kind of don't give a fuck about the friar. Sorry. I care more about Alia. I want to meet her, and I'm choosing that when we go with the friar, we're meeting Alia. Maybe we don't meet her, and I'll be like, man, what the fuck? But, I mean, it's not like... I mean, the poll options are to really go with Barnabas and Gerard. I forgot his name for a second. Go with Barnabas and Gerard, which isn't a guarantee that we'll make it to the library. Maybe we'll spontaneously get struck by lightning and everybody will die. And it's no guarantee that we'll meet Alia if we go with a friar. Maybe a spooky shadow demon will eat them. You just don't know with a podcast like this.
Yeah.
But I think both of us are gunning for the result and not necessarily the people.
I don't know. I don't necessarily think that I would vote Gerard and Barnabas because I want to go to a library. In fact, I would say I have no interest in hearing Arthur read from a book right now. I have less than no interest in, actually. I think I'd be bored as fuck if I had to go read a bunch of books right now. So no, I'm not really voting based on the fact that we would go see a library. I'm voting based on the fact that, like, first of all, I like Gerard and Barnabas's voices more than the Friar's voice, and I want to hear more of them. So that was part of my vote. But also, I think it's more interesting to hear them bicker and fight, and for Gerard to be nervous, because I think that's what would have happened. I think what would have happened was they walked to the library. The whole time Gerard is like, freaked out about Barnabas killing him, or Arthur, and saying they're all saying some snide shit about being suspicious. They walk into a library, maybe they have a subject that they're searching for, and they get to read a couple of titles of books before something crazy happens. That's kind of what I thought would happen if I were the DM and I were writing this. That's what the library would do. The friar, I genuinely have no idea, which does make it very interesting and exciting as an option, a good potential. But we also have something that I want to introduce for the first time on Autopsy. We have a lot of lore in this show that is becoming more and more relevant. And Peppers and I are not the experts on lore. In fact, we have a very hard time remembering any of it, as you can tell by the fact that Peppers has had to ask what a grinner is like 5 times. And no matter how many times we explain it to her, she probably won't remember, which is fine.
I won't remember.
Which means that we need to, to be fair and also to kind of keep everybody in the loop. We have a little team of lore keepers, lore experts who have done a lot more research and reading than either one of us have, and have helpfully provided some notes and information to us from the most recent chapter and some interesting things that we think are relevant. So I am going to go ahead and give a shout out to Nikki, because this week Nikki did a lot of the heavy lifting for lore. I also want to give a shout out to Hydrus, who is cited in this research as the first person to bring up some of these specific concepts. We're just going to talk a little bit about the entities that were mentioned. So we have the friar, who... Now, Peppers, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions before I read everything. Friar straight up said that he worships Gloon, Gloon, the corrupter of flesh. Master of the Temple is kind of the full title from the H.P. Lovecraft entity. What kind of fucking name is Gloon? Do you have any, what does that make you think of?
I don't know, bro, just like flesh, just grabbed a bunch of words and a bunch of letters and smushed them together and was like, yeah, okay.
What kind of a physical depiction would you, if I told you draw Gloon, and you knew nothing about him other than what you can remember from the chapter, which is...
He would be a bloater. He would be a bloater from, we'll do Last of Us. He'd be a fucking Last of Us, one of those huge, wart things, zombies.
Yes.
And you have to, the really big warts, you have to shoot with a shotgun in order to, get him to, topple down and actually get some good damage in. That's what I think he looks like.
Okay, that's fair. So we actually there is an image of Gloon on the H.P. Lovecraft wiki. Looks like a normal dude. I would say that probably traditionally masculine, handsome. But then from about the pelvis downward is a bunch of snails. So that's an option. You could definitely do that. But that's apparently what Gloon looks like.
Wow, this is a very, like, Greek-esque... It's giving Greek to me. I don't know
Yeah.
why. It's giving Greek god to me. Like that lady Medusa, except instead of the hair, it's all the legs.
Well, that's interesting because one of the bullet points here is slug-like, but used glamour to appear as a beautiful Dionysian sculpture.
Oh.
Physical contact with Gloon apparently can lead to eruption of painful boils, which is interesting.
So this follows my bloater
Yeah.
mention.
The next point that I have here, Gloon is trapped inside literal Atlantis. Small replicas of his pretty boy face are carried by his followers, who begin to have dreams of the undersea palace and become obsessed with finding a way down there to free Gloon. The other point that was mentioned was that, like, Horbrooke specifically says he was given a gift of flesh. And there's a theory out there that maybe it's his own appearance. Maybe he appears young because that is, quote unquote, the gift that Gloon gave him, which I think is interesting. I also think it's interesting that someone associated as a friar, which is kind of a religious position, would have a god like this, I guess I would say. And then we have the Order of the Fallen Star from Gerard. Now, we kind of touched on Azathoth when we talked about, well, when Graham talked about the obelisk and Grinners and the black stone, and mentioned all the different stones and everything. And I know that Fish has been on and has mentioned Azathoth as well. And to be honest with you, I mean, not only did Fish also contribute to this document, but everything I remember about Azathoth, I've learned from Fish. And a lot of that stuck in my head because he's very funny about it. But the funniest thing to me is that literally one of his titles is I think it is the blind idiot god or something like that. But it's literally idiot. They call him a fucking
Arthur!
idiot.
We're calling you, Arthur! We know who you were following all along.
Yeah, very much kind of sounds like Arthur. He is currently sleeping, and he's kind of locked away, and his dreams make up our reality. So that kind of folds into Cain's piano analogy. But he and the other outer gods exist outside of reality. Obviously, if he's dreaming reality, he's not part of it. That's kind of under the lid of Cain's piano metaphor. Now, the black stone is important because Azathoth supposedly all of the stones that we've been hearing about come from him, and the order is tasked with seeking them out, but they might have some kind of a greater goal. Then there's also the fact that we already know that Cain is his chosen name. Nyarlathotep is the name that he would be called if he were going by that as a god, but he has chosen his own identity, very similar to John, and he's picked a very human sounding name. And Nyarlathotep is connected to Azathoth in that I believe he's supposed to kind of carry out what Azathoth wants. If Azathoth wakes up, it's a bad thing. It means that reality kind of collapses, everything ends. So the idea is not to wake him up. And I believe the theory is that all of these stones, when gathered together, may potentially wake him up. I think that's confirmed, actually. Yes, yeah, Graham says confirmed. It's confirmed in Call of Cthulhu too. So bringing all these stones together is a bad thing. Will wake Azathoth up and will end reality. Not a great thing. So the fact that Cain, who is kind of supposed to be aligned with Azathoth and doing his bidding, kind of, wants all of these stones is not the most exciting thing. And the fact that we're tasked with getting him one that he can't see is concerning. However, we'll point out that Cain has broken a lot of rules, has done a lot of things that are not traditional of him, I think, and the fact that he's killed all the other ones. And this is the one timeline where Shub is not alive. And so there's a lot of things that are different here. So we don't even know what Cain wants with these stones. We're really just theorizing that maybe he wants to get them all together to wake Azathoth up, but we don't we don't fully understand. Fish mentions that the reason why Azathoth is an idiot is because it wants to join in on reality, but it doesn't understand that doing so would destroy reality because it's dreaming reality. Graham also points out that Shub is not alive in every timeline. This is just the timeline that retains traces of her. Shub is dead, erased. Yeah, she's not in the season 5 timeline, but in the OG Malevolent timeline. So anyway, lots of interconnected stuff here with these gods. I will also go quickly up to the potential. People have speculated on what Barnabas's god might be because they do think that he believes in something. Hydrus is, I believe, the one that proposed this initially. Groth, I'm going to say Grohth. The title is Doommaker. The entry reads that the cult of Groth has a few human worshippers, mostly sorcerer astrologers, which we know Barnabas is, and those who favor the coming of the end of the world. One small but organized group is called the Cult of Groth, who lurk in the Goatswood area of England and work to divine meaning in Groth's passing. A common belief for such cultists is an assurance of their coming death, of which they have little fear. Thus, they act without regard for their own safety, believing they will be rebirthed when Groth eventually returns to Earth. The relationship between Groth and Azathoth remains an area of conjecture, with some proposing that the two are linked and perhaps facets of the same entity. One, the creator, the other, the destroyer. Of course, such talk continues to be academic and unrooted in anything resembling fact. So Groth, what do you think Groth looks like, Peppers?
So I've already been spoiled in the chat
Oh,
by what he is, but I'll just for the sake of, like, if
thank you.
I heard the name Groth, I would think of, like, a really big ogre from, you know, that Baldur's Gate 3 when you're in Act 2 and that really big, like, no, he's not an ogre, he's like a really chunky, like, manifestation of, like, drawn up flesh. And like, if you feed him too much, like, drink, he'll explode.
Oh my god. That's
It's
hysterical.
really gross.
Oh my god.
So when I heard Groth, I was like, yeah, that's an undead, like, mound of flesh that's all
fair.
together and kind of looks like an ogre.
Oh my god. Yeah, I could see that. Terrifying.
So that's Groth to me.
Of course, we do have an actual depiction of Groth. I don't think there is an official art, I don't think. But it's just basically an eyeball. Like a planet with an eyeball is really the best way I can describe it. Hydra says followers of Groth also receive prophetic visions from him. That's cool. And then I would also say, really highlighting the fact that most followers are astronomers or sorcerers. And he's said to possibly be an alternate face of Azathoth, kind of like a different version. There's still a lot of speculation on that, which could be the reason why Barnabas is so, like, dismissive of everybody else. Maybe that is something that is still widely debated and Barnabas has strong feelings about it. Now, Groth may be the destroyer to make way for rebirth, and Azathoth being like a creator or a dreamer would be seen as, I guess, the more favored one. Maybe there's a rivalry there.
Well, I mean, he does look really cool. I'm not even gonna lie. He looks kind of baller. Literally, he's a ball with an eye.
Yeah, so it says, as Broth approaches a planet, some who dwell there may receive premonitions of calamity to come. Such premonitions may come as auditory hallucinations, dreams, waking visions, and so on. For a few, these will consume their minds, driving them to take ever more dramatic action. Others may be overcome with despondency, while some reach for a form of enlightenment, able to conceive of Groth's approach and devote themselves to preparing the way for Groth in the most distasteful and violent of acts. So, very interesting. I think these are all really good things to keep in mind as we go forward, and also because all of it could be different. Like, all of this could be shown to be not exactly textbook and in some way altered or changed depending on how Harlan is going to handle all the mythos and stuff. Peppers, one last question. How would you depict Azathoth?
He would be like a black hole. He would be like a galaxy inside a black hole.
Wow.
Or a black hole in a galaxy. But I think whichever of the two would look cooler.
That's
That's
fair.
how I see him.
I love that. I love that for him. Okay, well, was there anything interesting that you wanted to talk about or anything that you wanted to mention before we close out?
No, I am just really hoping that we do meet the witch. Yeah. That's it.
Me too. I really do hope we do. And I know that people would like to hear Harlan give another shot at another lady voice, which would be cool. But even if he doesn't, I think that we will get something interesting about Aaliyah, the witch, regardless. So I'm very excited. Thank you to everyone joining us live, like Graham and Fish and Hydrus. Thank you to our volunteer transcription team and our volunteer editing team, especially Misra. And thanks to everyone listening in the future. You can find Malevolent Autopsy on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. Visit Linktree/Malevolent Autopsy for all the handiest links. As always, the horrors persist.
But so do we.